all her life she was a teacher, all her life. And she was a good one. She was one of my pupil teachers for a time being. And ever since I knew her, she was that community person, not just in the classroom, but in the community, visiting and making sure that elderly people were taken care of in many different ways. And so we pass on to her son Woodburn and the daughter Tanya and Barry, son Barry, and other family members. Our condolences and our thanks to Miss Bernice for being one of those pioneers in the education system of our country. And also I pass on to the Hydes family again, their son, Bob, and then the late Marian Dissenter Ebanks, who was in her 90s and passed away suddenly at home. And so we extend our condolences to Waveline and Nellie and Rosemary and their families, our deepest sympathy. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the Customs and Border Control family, we'd also like to extend our deepest condolences to Mr. Arthur Banks' family. As members and many members and many in the public would be aware, Mr. Arthur worked with the CBC for 30 years of really good service. He was a personal friend to my father, and for me on a personal level, I remember many times as a young man traveling back and forth for school, I could always look for that welcoming face, so I do feel it for him. As many people know, I mean, since retiring from government, he and his wife operated the pharmacy in Savannah that actually served many people in the Eastern District, especially even on Sundays, in terms of when people need medicine and everything else to their family. So I want to send my deepest condolences. This one is also a little bit personal to the Ministry of Finance, in that one of her key members, Karen, is actually her brother-in-law that passed through. So I just want to send my deepest condolences in that regard. Madam Speaker, I'd also like to recognize the passing of another Caymanian icon recently, Mr. Robert Bodden, original from Red Bay, but made his home in Lower Valley. His wife Hazel, who I know is always well tuned into these sessions, I just want to send the condolences and record the passing of another great Caymanian. His funeral was attended by members of this house from both sides. I know Sir Alden McLaughlin from Red Bay was at his funeral, as my colleague also from Savannah, from memory, was also there. So I just want to recognize his passing and also send condolences to Brian, Susie, and Ingrid on the passing of their dad, who was definitely a trailblazer, and many Caymanians actually owe him a great debt of gratitude in allowing them to even buy a property to build their homes. So thank you all very much.
The Honourable the Honourable Minister for Culture.
I would also like to bring forward the name of Miss Joan Hydes, the daughter of people know Mr. Boy, Jonina Liquor Store, the sister of Sharon, Mitchell, Richard. She passed away as well, and on behalf of my colleagues, I'd like to offer that whole family condolences as well.
Any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Deputy Governor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to join you and other members of the House in offering condolences to all of the bereaved family. Madam Speaker, in particular, Mr. Arthur, who was a good friend of mine, We played football together for many years in West Bay. Very fond memories of our time together. And I remember him graduating, I think maybe a year ahead of me. And I remember getting on the bus one day going to school and saw Arthur walking down the road very proudly in his customs uniform. And he wore that so well. He was always looked very smart. He looked the part. And it reinforced my desire to join a uniform service. Just seeing him in his uniform and seeing how proud he was to wear that uniform. And subsequently, I joined immigration and worked many long evenings and nights with Arthur at the airport, working together. We remained friends throughout. I used to see him in church in West Bay from time to time. And hearing last night that he had passed away was very sad situation. We have lost an icon who was an outstanding civil servant, outstanding public servant who gave a lot back to make Cayman the great place that it is. So on behalf of all of us in the civil service and the wider public service, I want to also extend condolences to his family. Also to Mr. Solomon, who, like you said, we all knew as Solly. He was a sponsor of our team that I played along with Arthur. Arabots Youth United. He used to sponsor us for many years, and we got to know him very well. And he said a lot about how he cared about our community, that he was a sponsor for a football team. And he was a good man who did a lot of good for Cayman. Lots of it gone on he didn't brag about it, he just did it. And he was one of our most successful entrepreneurs. So his son and I, Jamil, worked together at immigration. So I want to offer condolences to all the family, but especially Jamil. Also to Miss Bernice Levy. I was so sad to hear her passing. She has done so much for the people of West Bay as a teacher. And her son Woodburn is a doctor practicing in the United States. So I want to offer him condolences as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to join with other colleagues who have expressed condolences to families of these very significant people who have passed away. It is certainly indeed sad to be able to have to lose people that we love, people that are such significant contributors to our society, to our country. I would just take the opportunity as well to extend condolences to the family of Mr. Craig Arch, who I think is the Audi one of the principals, at least, of the Audi dealership in Cayman, and he is certainly a gentleman that will be missed as well. I think he's had considerable Caymanian roots, although he may have been raised elsewhere. So just wanted to extend those as well, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister for Tourism and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise also to pass on my sympathies to the family members that have been raised by my colleagues, but to also add two other members of my community who have recently passed, two icons, I dare say, in my community, Miss Glennis Ramon Navarro, better known as Miss Gurley, who recently passed about a month ago, and Miss Mary Janet Borden Downs, who is also from the Central community. My hearts and prayers go out to the family as they deal with the passing of their loved ones. But to double down on the Honorable Deputy Governor and Honorable Premier about Mr. Arthur E. Banks and Mr. Solly. Mr. Arthur E. Banks and I used to be on the national dart team together. I didn't share any working opportunities with him, but he did teach me how to play darts as a young man. And I will forever remember the good times and the smiles and the advice he gave me. Last but not least, Mr. Solly, better known as the Arabus man to me as a young man. And believe it or not, Madam Speaker, the reason why I know how to tie my own tie in the mornings today is because of him. I grew up without having to tie a tie. And in my youthful years of trying to be Mr. Fashion Boy, the only person you could go to understand how to be a true man in respect to your attire was Mr. Solly, and he taught me so much. And this country is truly going to miss his value. I was so saddened even when we found out he was going to close his shop. Georgetown itself didn't even feel the same. I even contemplated opening a store, a men's store, in his memory when he closed it, or even buying out what he was going to close. But I don't think I could ever fill those shoes in respect to what it takes for a male person to dress, but his memory will live on. So my heart and thoughts goes out to the family of Mr. Solly and Mr. Arthur throughout these difficult times. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, there was one that we wanted to mention, who is the late Haldane Bodden, who was a barber for many years here in Cayman, operating here in Georgetown. And I think he was just about 97 years old.
Thank you. The Honorable Deputy Speaker wanted to say a few words as well in relation to Mr. Bodden. Unfortunately, he's not here at this time. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, seems like hardly a day passes where you don't hear of someone who is so well known and respected in communities is passing away. Just been so much death and sadness in our communities over the past several weeks. And I wanted to join with everyone else and yourself who has expressed condolences, and I do so on behalf of the opposition, to all the families that are grieving and mourning at this time. I think of Ms. Bernice, I think of Mr. Arch, Mr. Solomon, and Arthur E. Banks as well. All well known, all made very significant contributions to this community and to this country in their respective fields. And so you know that their contributions and their memories will live on in us for years to come, and I know that they've all left their own mark and legacy indelibly stamped on their loved ones and those that they would call their friends, family, and associates. And so I join with others in expressing my condolences on behalf of my family and the opposition to all of these families who are grieving at this time. I pray that they will take comfort in the knowledge that and understanding that there is indeed a life after death. And we all believe that there is a day when we will all meet together again in this afterlife and we'll see each other. So with that, Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too, in addition to my colleagues offering messages of condolences to families of the bereaved, I also want to take this time to offer publicly condolences to the Christian family, Mr. Nelson and his family, for the loss of his wife, Miss Perlina, a couple of weeks ago. And I want to pass that public on behalf of the Premier and this government to those families. Ms. Perlina, we had gotten to know her a lot better over the last few years, and I know that she was not only a mother to her own family, but the extended families that lived around her. In addition, I just also want to say a special condolence to the family of Arthur. Arthur and I had a special relationship, and it was just yesterday when I learned of his passing that someone else called me and said that his last message to them a few weeks ago was that he would see them soon on a visit. He wanted them to continue to pray for myself as the MP for East End, because we had such a close relationship, and that really touched me yesterday evening, that would have been his last message to one of my friends. So just really want to pass on condolences to his family as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business.
The Honourable Premier.
Madam Speaker, the order paper for the day sets out the bills to be covered under government business, as well as subsequently the government motion. I would rise to move, Madam Speaker, the reordering of the government business such that the government motion be heard first, and in relation to the bills that the identification register bill be heard first, so that would become number 2, and the identification card bill would become number 3. So I so move that, Madam Speaker, on the relevant standing orders.
Does the Honourable Premier wish to offer an explanation?
Madam Speaker, the motion obviously relates to the referendum that is being proposed by government, and that is most closely aligned at this point with the gambling bill. So having the two of those dealt with consecutively in that manner is regarded to be most convenient and appropriate for us. And in respect of the change of order for the registry bill, the identification register bill and the Cayman Islands identification card bill, the first one, the identification register bill, is the platform of which the card bill effectively would operate. So it is thought that it would be most appropriate to actually deal with the register bill first, then deal with the card bill.
Madam Speaker, matter of procedure which the Premier is dealing with, are you saying that you're moving to the government motion first? Is that what's being said? Madam Speaker, as you know by now, I've tabled an amendment to the gambling amendment bill. If you deal with that first, what is going to happen then to my amendment or the bill. Because both, well, as long as they're saying, Madam Speaker, that it's not going to affect the amendment, and I'm saying that because the government motion is asking for a referendum, which impinges on my amendment to the gaming bill, or gaming amendment bill, yes. So as long as you're saying, as long as you're not saying that when the time comes in committee for that amendment, that I couldn't put that amendment.
Member for West Bay West, we can proceed with the change in the order of business and still accept your amendments to your motion. Sorry, amendment to the bill. The question is that the order of business on the order paper is rearranged.
Madam Chair.
On the member for Red Bay.
Madam Speaker, all of us over here are a bit bemused. There's been no explanation. We had a business committee meeting. We agreed the order for today. And in quite an unusual way, if not unprecedented, the Premier is now, I presume he's moving a motion to reorder the government business by promoting the motion for a national referendum on gambling and the decriminalization of marijuana. Trying to find it. Yes, small quantities of cannabis. I think Caymanians call it ganja, but anyhow. With no explanation really as to why we are dealing with that. Is that a matter of urgency? Is there going to be a referendum before the end of the year? Why are we dealing with that in an order that is not conventional and is not in accordance with the relevant standing order? In fact, the minister, the Premier, will have to suspend the relevant standing order if he is going to promote a motion over bills, if I am not mistaken. Perhaps the Minister of Education can help.
Honorable Premier.
Sorry. Madam Speaker, under Standing Order 86, the House has the ability to suspend standing orders. And in respect of Standing Order 14, 14.1L typically sets out government business as being first bills and then secondly motions. This is simply a request for the House to reorder the business to deal with the one motion that is related to the gambling bill, most closely related to that, which is going to be the first bill on the order that is being dealt with. That isn't being changed at all. And to the point made by the member from West Bay West, obviously that has no impact on any proposed amendments which may be dealt with in committee stage. So, Madam Speaker, the other two changes as well, or the one real change, is just a reordering of what is listed currently as items 2 and 3 of the bills, which is the Cayman Islands Identification Card Bill and the Cayman Islands Register Bill, just swapping those two bills around. Madam Speaker, surely there can't be any objection. It is entirely without any merit to suggest that it is unprecedented. I've seen it done many times in this House by the government, Madam Speaker. So I so move, and I would request that somebody's microphone. I request that the motion be heard and the question put, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, the Premier is absolutely right concerning the changing in the order of business at times. I still have a concern about the amendment and being so closely related to the bill and the motion. Why is it that we want to change it around at this time? Is there any particular urgency to it? I mean, I don't know, but if there is,
Honorable Premier.
Madam Speaker, I'm not sure why there is this much concern about this issue. I have indicated that the two are related. I will be dealing with both matters, and I would prefer to bring the motion up first and then deal with the gambling bill immediately thereafter. I think it makes perfect sense to address both issues because of the fact that they are connected. And I'm not aware that we really need to have much more of a substantive rationale or reason to do it. Madam Speaker, I have moved the motion previously. I will restate the motion for the benefit of everyone. The motion, Madam Speaker, is to suspend Standing Order 14.1L in order to just reorder the business as I have previously noted, which would be firstly to move the government motion from the end of the list of readings, and that's government motion number 3 of 2022-23, referendum on national lottery and decriminalization of small quantities of cannabis, to put that first on the government business order, and then secondly, to change the order for 2 of the bills, which is moving the identification register bill up in the sequence and moving the Cayman Islands identification card bill down in the sequence. And I've given the rationale for that, which is that the register bill is the foundational bill, which allows the card to effectively work as contemplated, and it is thought that it is most appropriate to deal with it in that manner, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The question is that the order of business on the order paper is rearranged so that government motion can be dealt with before the bills. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
No.
The ayes have it. For completeness, I also just want to reiterate that the motion just approved now amends the order of business to have the government motion heard first, and that the two bills brought by the Honorable Minister for Financial Services and Commerce is switched, which relate to the identification bill and register.
Motions. Government motion number 3 of 2022-2023, referendum on national lottery and decriminalization of small quantities of cannabis, to be moved by the Honourable Premier.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to move government motion number 3 of 2022-23, entitled Referendum on National Lottery and Decriminalization of Small Quantities of Cannabis. Madam Speaker, the motion reads, whereas Section 69 of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 provides that a law enacted by the Parliament may make provision to hold a referendum amongst persons registered as electors in accordance with Section 90 on a matter or matters of national importance. And whereas the matter of whether decriminalization of the possession of small quantities for personal use and consumption of cannabis is in the best interest of the islands and its residents, and whereas there has been much debate for many years on the subject of introducing a national lottery, and whereas in September 2022 the government indicated that it was considering holding a referendum on the subjects of decriminalization of cannabis and the introduction of a national lottery, be it now therefore resolved that the following be declared matters of national importance: A, whether a national lottery should be introduced in the Cayman Islands, and B, whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized. And be it now therefore further resolved that the said matters be specified in a bill and brought by the government to this Parliament for debate in accordance with the provisions of Section 69 of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 as amended.
The motion has been moved and is open for debate. Does the Honourable Premier wish to speak thereto?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak to the government motion number 3 of 2022, which seeks to declare two important questions, matters of national importance. And that is A, whether a national lottery should be introduced in the Cayman Islands, and B, whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized, and that these matters be specified in a bill and brought by the government to this Parliament, this Honourable Parliament, for debate in accordance with the provisions of Section 69 of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 as amended. Madam Speaker, I stand here today as Premier in this Honourable House on what is another seminal moment for our beloved islands, as we as a government once again demonstrate our willingness to not shirk away from challenging issues, but directly engage and include our Caymanian people, the very same people who have given us the privilege of representing them in decisions of national importance, which for years have been debated, discussed, and kicked around our community. Madam Speaker, the introduction of a national lottery and the decriminalization of the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis. The two issues which are at the heart of this motion will no doubt spark much discussion and debate, not only within this Honourable House, but within homes, workplaces, public gatherings, and I dare say across this country, wherever people gather, Madam Speaker. But that's not a bad thing, Madam Speaker. But it falls to me to set the tone at this point by explaining firstly why now is the time for a bill for a referendum to be brought. Then by clarifying what is required today in the Parliament, and to explain what the process will entail if the motion is carried. Firstly, Madam Speaker, I want to emphasize the need for all of us within this Honourable House and within our own communities to demonstrate the highest level of respect and tolerance for diverse viewpoints and, dare I say, strongly held convictions that accompany these types of matters of national importance. Madam Speaker, on timing, it is a well-known fact that this government stands for people-driven, accountable, competent, and transparent, the acronym PACT. Madam Speaker, the motion before us today embodies the heart and soul of our approach to governance. For years, Madam Speaker, discussions and the odd public debate here and there have been vocalized around these two issues. What has been lacking, Madam Speaker, is the political will and the commitment to progress the national debate forward. Perhaps, Madam Speaker, it was a lack of an ability to carefully frame the discussion, or maybe it was just the fear of the political backlash for advancing either one of these two issues, or perhaps even just concern about engaging with our people, the people who vote for us, Madam Speaker, on issues like this. Madam Speaker, we can hypothesize all day about why that has been the case in the past. But in April of last year, this new administration was elected, one which refuses to kick the can down the road on difficult issues. I therefore wish to commend my colleagues for their support, for underscoring our commitment to leadership, to democracy, to addressing the tough issues head-on, and for supporting this motion. Madam Speaker, I believe that this motion, which if carried, would require the presentation of a referendum bill, is quite clear and unequivocal. First and foremost, the legal and constitutional framework exists. Section 69 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker, provides a law enacted by the legislature may make, which would be read as Parliament, may make provision to hold a referendum amongst persons registered as electors in accordance with Section 90 on a matter or matters of national importance when so resolved by the majority of the elected members of the Parliament. So, Madam Speaker, the Constitution envisages that from time to time there be matters, and I emphasize the plural there, of national importance, which could be decided by way of a referendum amongst registered electors, registered voters. Madam Speaker, this government believes that on these issues the time is now. We have two matters which we desire the support of this Parliament to be specified in a bill and brought back to this Parliament for debate, after which a referendum could take place. Madam Speaker, of course, the requirement for this resolution as a precondition to bringing the bill for the referendum exists, and that is why we are doing this motion at this time. Madam Speaker, why now? Well, quite frankly, both matters potentially signal a significant shift in our jurisprudence and indeed our collective value system. They're simply very important issues which we must hear the views of the people on. Madam Speaker, in relation to the National Lottery, I wish to carefully set out the parameters of that matter, and that is whether a national lottery should be introduced in the Cayman Islands. Madam Speaker, the government wishes to seek the guidance of our people on this very narrow area of gambling. A national lottery, Madam Speaker, as the name and the term infers, would be government-owned or controlled and operated. Madam Speaker, I must make it clear that this motion does not seek to legalize gambling generally or other lotteries, which would continue to be illegal. That point, Madam Speaker, to that point, Madam Speaker, we have on the order paper for presentation and debate the Gambling Amendment Bill 2022, which will seek to strengthen the penalties for illegal lotteries and gambling activities, and for many of the good reasons which will be articulated when that bill is debated and presented, Madam Speaker. However, in considering the pervasiveness of illegal gambling on our islands, the government is compelled to acknowledge that there is a significant acceptance of lotteries. At the end of the day, there is a demand, with the only supply being unsafe, unregulated, and unchecked illegal operations and outfits, which are creating significant societal risks and costs. Madam Speaker, we are reinforcing our commitment to uphold the law by not accepting or continuing to accept and kicking the can down the road in relation to illegal numbers operations, but giving the public the opportunity to indicate to us as their representatives whether they wish for us to introduce a government-controlled and operated national lottery, one which is regulated, has the necessary controls around it, and is done in a transparent way. So, Madam Speaker, the really important point in this, at this point, is that this is purely about a lottery, a national lottery. This is not about the operation of casinos. This is not about asking whether gambling, per se, in its widest sense, should be allowed. This is focused on one issue, and that one issue alone, and that is whether it is the will of the people of the Cayman Islands to tell or to indicate to the government by their participation and the results of the referendum whether they wish the government to introduce a national lottery. Madam Speaker, we believe the time is now to inquire of our people on this matter. Madam Speaker, switching over to the second issue, that is decriminalization of the small quantities, possession and consumption of small quantities of cannabis, marijuana, ganja, whatever term we typically refer to it. Madam Speaker, there was a time when legislation talked about marijuana being illegal to possess or consume, for that matter. And charges were brought against individuals to the effect that they were illegally in possession of ganja. An erudite and astute lawyer waited until the 6 months was up and put the argument that the charge was ineffective, that the law didn't say you couldn't possess ganja, the law said you couldn't possess marijuana. And the argument found favor, Madam Speaker. That perhaps is not the only reason, but we refer to this as cannabis or marijuana, ganja being the more sort of slang vernacular for it. Yes, more colloquial expression, yes. So, Madam Speaker, we're eager to move this forward. Early on in this administration, this was a matter that was discussed. We all went through campaigns in early 2021, and it was an issue for many young people. Madam Speaker, I know this issue goes back even before that. When I was first elected to this Honorable House in 2013 to 2017, in the period 2013 to 2017, we had many representations at that time as well that it was unduly impacting the lives of our young people, preventing them, people who are otherwise law-abiding people, or perhaps had, through youthful indiscretion, been involved at an earlier time, and it was impacting their lives. Madam Speaker, that was part of the reason why we brought forward a piece of legislation to replace the original Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, which was the Criminal Record Spent Convictions Law, or Act as I recall, law as it was then, with new schedules allowing the expungement from their records. But Madam Speaker, whether you expunge it after 5 years, or whether it doesn't form a part of your criminal record to begin with, is a very significant distinction. And that is the distinction that decriminalization relates to. Madam Speaker, in presenting the government's 2022 to 24 strategic policy statement, we set out our collective position. And that was under broad outcome number 3, which is providing solutions to improve the well-being of our people so they can achieve their full potential. And there was a subsection to that, which was designed to address creating greater employment opportunities for Caymanians. That includes removing obstacles to their employment, Madam Speaker. In fact, Madam Speaker, our government's commitment is set out in point H, which states reduce discrimination against young people in education and employment through decriminalization of marijuana or cannabis. Madam Speaker, I can go further. And say that this is a clear demonstration of this government's desire and delivery to follow through on its commitment, on our commitments, on our promises to the people of the country. Madam Speaker, we see this as a matter of justice and a matter of fairness. I wish to propose to the public a new approach of decriminalizing the consumption and possession of small amounts of marijuana or cannabis. Madam Speaker, decriminalization, as I said earlier, takes away the status of criminal convictions or criminal law from those acts to which it is applied. This means that certain acts would no longer constitute criminal offenses if the public were to vote for the decriminalization of cannabis or marijuana. It would still be illegal, Madam Speaker, to consume it or possess small amounts, but you would not have a criminal record. They would no longer be criminal offenses. Madam Speaker, it doesn't mean that there would be no consequences. The consequences, Madam Speaker, would rather than having a criminal record and being fined or having some other, perhaps even a custodial sentence applied, Madam Speaker, the consequences would be something along the lines of an administrative fine, a fixed penalty, or perhaps for the first occasion or very, very small amounts, it might even be just a warning from the police at that time. So, Madam Speaker, consumption, possession would still be illegal, but it changes the nature of the penalty for a person who consumes or possesses within the prescribed amount, which we all have to recognize has not yet been determined. But many countries have approached this issue, Madam Speaker. There is much guidance. I think Jamaica has done it from 2015 in relation to a couple of ounces. It doesn't have to be a precedent that we follow. There are many other countries, many developed countries, that have addressed this issue for this same, or some of these same reasons. So, Madam Speaker, I just want to be clear. This is about decriminalization. This is not about legalization. Madam Speaker, too many times the two issues are conflated, but they are very different. And in terms of this decriminalization, this would be asking the people to tell us that they, whether or not they find it acceptable that the possession or consumption of small amounts of marijuana or cannabis, instead of having a criminal consequence in terms of a criminal record plus whatever other deterrent fines or sentence might be involved. It would instead simply be an administrative action. Madam Speaker, it's important as well to point out that this is not about permitting the open possession and consumption of cannabis, or public smoking, or vaping of cannabis, or the cultivation of cannabis. Madam Speaker, we know that some of our fellow overseas territories have attempted to bring legislation to effectively legalize, whether they described it as that or not, and to allow, or attempt to allow, the cultivation. That is not an option, Madam Speaker, that is open to us. We have seen that in other territories where that attempt has been made, we have been reminded that we are bound by an international convention which prevents that. Of course, Madam Speaker, we as a country and the government at the time, then administration at that time, of which I was a minister, amended the misuse of drugs law, and that's 2016, to allow for the medicinal use of cannabis oil. Madam Speaker, the use of cannabis extracts and traces of cannabis, such as CBD oil, for medical or therapeutic purposes has been legal since then. It must be prescribed by a doctor licensed in the Cayman in accordance with the health practice law. And of course, the prescription must be a part of treatment for a person under a medical doctor's care. Now, Madam Speaker, some of the motivating factors propelling legislative change to provide for the decriminalization of the consumption and possession of small quantities of cannabis or marijuana include addressing the issues of numerous arrests and wide imprisonment, which strain law enforcement resources and fill the prisons with otherwise law-abiding citizens who have had small amounts of marijuana in their possession. There is, Madam Speaker, also a propensity to incarcerate, which has led to a wasteful, in some views, and certainly costly, for sure, penal system, where many potentially productive lives and families have been very significantly and negatively impacted without redounding to the wider benefit of the society. Madam Speaker, the prejudicial effect on the young people who have a criminal record for offenses involving the possession of small amounts of cannabis or marijuana can, as mentioned earlier, and I think we all know these as facts. We all have constituents that have raised these issues with us. We know that it impacts, at times, their ability, no matter how, within the period of expungement, no matter how far away from the act of the conviction, it impacts their ability to get jobs in some cases. It also impacts potentially individuals' abilities to travel or to perhaps even pursue opportunities for migration. Madam Speaker, here in the Cayman Islands, we like to consider ourselves willing to adopt best practices, willing to look at recent developments in other parts of the world and decide which of those we think are relevant and appropriate for us to adopt. And certainly, Madam Speaker, we have a lot of developments in international and regional jurisprudence which indicates that issues around criminal possession are complex, are perhaps unjust, unfair. Some would even say has an issue, maybe even violates human rights and freedoms. But Madam Speaker, we can decide what's appropriate for us. And this is an opportunity to ask our people, what approach do you want your government, your parliament, your legislators, your representatives to adopt on this issue? So, Madam Speaker, I just want to re-emphasize that we feel that now is the time to consider these two matters as matters of national importance because of in the first case, in terms of the gambling, the reality that it is widespread, the reality that it is regulated by legislation which is extremely old and has not been made fit for purpose and kept up with the times. And in the case of consumption and possession of small amounts, the impacts that it has on our young people, and the fact that there is a wave. We have adopted medical marijuana, and around the world there is a view that small amounts, such as this is contemplating, should not have too significant a consequence on the lives of people. And this, Madam Speaker, is the opportunity. This is the government, hopefully, perhaps optimistically, perhaps too optimistically, the whole Parliament wishing to give and support the right of the people of our country to make a decision on these really what we say are important issues and what our constituents tell us are important issues, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, of course, some might say, well, a referendum isn't absolutely required for this. That's correct. The government could be making these decisions. But, again, I go back to the point made earlier. We wish, as a government that is reflective of the views of the people and accountable to the people, we wish to be the government who is listening to the people on issues that are important like this. This is in the long-term best interest of these islands to fully utilize the provisions of the Constitution in this way. Madam Speaker, this is what it was intended for, and we're seeking to give the people a direct say on matters of national importance which impact their lives. Madam Speaker, today is simply about considering this motion, in terms of this motion, simply about considering this, and it's not a decision on the matters themselves. As I've said, that will follow with a referendum bill. In fact, the questions get finalized and set out in that bill specifically as well. They will be reflective, obviously, of the two matters of national importance that we have outlined in the resolution. Madam Speaker, if I can again outline the process on this issue. The successful passage of this motion would authorize the government to return to Parliament, this Parliament, with a bill which we can refer to as a referendum bill in accordance with the provisions of Section 69 of the Cayman Islands Constitution, Order 2009 as amended, and that means, Madam Speaker, that given the timing now, the earliest that we'd be doing that would be the first quarter of next year. Of course, we're all familiar with the requirements for public consultation, which is enshrined in the Constitution. Originally it was 21 days, now extended to 28 days. There is obviously the possibility to certify shorter notice, but this is not an issue, Madam Speaker, that I certainly would regard as appropriate to issue short notice on. Madam Speaker, one other point that I want to make, in fairness and in full transparency, is that democracy is not cheap, and it's certainly not free. We have received indications from the Supervisor of Elections that the projected costs associated with this referendum, inclusive of postal ballots, mobile voting, and general polling on referendum day, are in the region of $1.1 million. But, Madam Speaker, it is an issue that we think the people of the country deserve to have their say on. Madam Speaker, again, there are lots of views, one way and the other, on this issue. Sometimes there are strong sentiments, and sometimes in our discussions we can have passionate interactions. But I would just, again, ask people to discuss issues like this with respect. And I would say that this is a test of our value system in our ability to discuss issues like this respectfully. Madam Speaker, regardless of the outcome of the referendum, what it may be in the future, today the principle of democracy, and more importantly, our people will have scored a victory because we have, as a government, brought this motion for consideration to give them the opportunity to have a say on these two issues of national importance. And it's a reflection of our courage and our ability to, again, address difficult issues, tough issues. So, Madam Speaker, that is why we believe the time is now to declare two important issues of national importance, whether a national lottery should be introduced in the Cayman Islands, and whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized, and that these matters be brought in a bill by the government to this Parliament for debate in accordance with the provisions of Section 69 of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, we believe our people are ready for this debate, and our position as a government will be to try to ensure that there is balanced sharing of information, and the government's intention is to just listen to the people. We do not wish to promote a result one way or the other. This is the opportunity for the people of this country to share their views with themselves and with their representatives. Madam Speaker, we will support our people through that process. And we will trust our people, Madam Speaker, to make the right decision, to decide by way of a referendum. So we will step out of the way and let our people have their say on these issues that we wish to hear from them on. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for West Bay West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've listened very intently to the Premier and the arguments put forward for a referendum. It is a very compelling argument for any government to seek the will of the people on a national lottery for Cayman. But in the meantime, the numbers game is already a national game going on. And government says there is serious crime involved, and therefore we must increase the fines. Well, I doubt that saying I'm seeking the will of the people is going to stop that. Or, on the other hand, is it not going to increase the crime? Anyway, my concern is about time. Time. My feeling is, in the time it will take to bring a bill, to have a referendum, unless it has been pointed out, I never caught if the Premier is saying, is setting a time frame. I don't know. I didn't catch that if he did say so. First quarter. Then you got to have the referendum, you got to go out and campaign, For it. Well, for it or against it, but I would imagine the government might be saying on the campaign trail, we want this. But my concern is timing. And my concern is if there is a yes, then you have to come up with a lottery. And that will take us, you have to come up with a lottery system. I guess consultants have to be employed, et cetera, to create a lottery system. And when then will that take us to? I know it is a hard thing for a new government to say, we will make the numbers legal. I guess it's a most difficult thing. And you will hear it's not democratic. It's a good argument. It's a good argument to say that the government, that we are being democratic to bring a referendum. Then, what happens if the referendum vote is close between the no's and the yes? So close that it gives jitters to go with the close yes, or jitters to go with the no's. And government advises or advisors says it's too close to go to set up a system. That's the risk we take with a referendum. Then the illegal numbers game and the funds going out of the country continue, and the serious crime continue. There is no doubt from what I am hearing that there is going to be a huge pushback from our churches and other religious people who will fight usually about what causes social deterioration. That's going to be part and parcel of their argument. So if there is a huge no, then what of the issue? Government will say, no, we can't go. It's a huge no, and the people, and we have done right because we have been democratic, and we have come, and we've campaigned, and we've said where we want to go, and the people have said no. So what happens? Because there's going to be a lot of people who are saying yes to some sort of legal games, because a lot of people play, and a lot of people depend on their income today with that, from what I'm hearing. I don't want to hear nobody come tell me that he plays it too, because I don't. I buy the lottery like most people do in the States, if you're there. But there are issues not just to come and say we can have a referendum and we've done the democratic thing. Because those who have the jitters about saying yes to the numbers game and making that legal, they can have the same jitters if this is turned down. And I know this is not going to be easy for government. So don't think that we can just say we can have a referendum and that's going to be it. No. You all, and I say you all because I really don't know yet where I stand on the issue of this bill, of this motion. But those that are proposing it is going to have to go out and push for it. Or what sense does it make? I don't know of any other way of me supporting something and I go in behind some grape tree and say, I'm for that, you know. But you're not getting up in public and saying, I am for this and I want this. The government's going to have to do that. So I have concerns about time, about the setup. And I know that the government can't say right off, you know, what they will set up, because you're going to the public to ask people to say yes or no. Maybe they'll say to me, hey, you're not democratic anyhow. Maybe that's what will be said to me. But I know this, I've got good common sense. I see a lot of practical issues in this, that it won't be as easy as sitting in our caucus and saying and debating it and then bringing the motion here. The fight is when we go to the public. What then?
The Honourable Member for Red Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, could I pray the aid of one of the lecterns? I need something to lean up on. I'm going to be here a little while and I'm not going to notice. That one. Madam Speaker, this House ought to listen to the wise counsel of the member from West Bay West. Whatever else, thank you, sir. Whatever else may be said of him, he is a wily old veteran of Cayman politics, the longest survivor ever. I am going to start where he left off, not because that had been my plan, but because I think that that is the point that the Premier has missed entirely. It is political naivety at its highest to believe that a government can promote a referendum and take no side. You gotta have one side or the other side, or as West Bay said, jockey both sides, but you got to have a side. How can a government believe that it can promote a referendum, and when they're asked by the electorate, by their constituents, well, Mr. Premier, what do you think about it? Well, it's not really what I think about it, you know. It's what you think about it. I want you to tell me what you think about it. But you're the one who know these things, you big-time lawyer and all like that. You're the Premier. I lived all of this with Madam Speaker. In fact, Madam Speaker, the Constitution is set up in a way that allows the government under Section 69 to ask the House to resolve that there should be a referendum on a matter or matters of national importance. But it also provides under Section 70 for a people-initiated referendum, so that if it is the people who want or who believe that we ought to have a national lottery, or that we ought to decriminalize the possession and consumption of small quantities of cannabis, they can start a petition. And having reached the requisite number of electors' signatures, they can then present the petition to the cabinet, who are required constitutionally to then formulate a question which properly reflects. I have the Constitution, thank you, I have one. That properly reflects what it is that the petitioners are asking the government to do. Madam Speaker, I have a little experience in that. And shall I say that that is fraught with endless possibilities for the government to stumble at some stage. The people-initiated referendum, which was initiated as a result of the cruise port issue, resulted in at least 2 major court cases, which went all the way to the Court of Appeal. Anybody see any cruise port started there? Even though ultimately the Court of Appeal found that all of these challenges were without merit. But understand that any bill that we pass here, any referendum bill that we pass here, is subject to judicial review and to scrutiny. So I come to my first problem with the motion. It is far too imprecise. Madam Speaker, maybe you can help with this. We were given a copy of the motion some time ago, sent from the business, as part of the business paper, but we've just recently been handed another. Is there a difference? I can't perceive one. Or there's been no change? The one that was circulated to members with the business papers, this one, and one just handed to us now by the parliamentary page. All I'm asking is, has there been any change? Because I can't find one.
There have been no changes that I'm aware of.
Okay. Madam Speaker, Section 69 entitled Power to Provide for a Referendum. An act enacted by the legislature may make provision to hold a referendum amongst persons registered as electors, that's voters, in accordance with Section 90 on a matter or matters of national importance, when so resolved by the majority of the elected members of the Assembly or of the Parliament now. So, Madam Speaker, I have no issue with the government going about it in this manner. But experience has taught me, and should teach us all, the need to set out what the question is carefully and precisely, to minimize the possibility of challenges down the road. Now, when the resolution seeks the following be declared matters of national importance: A, whether a national lottery should be introduced in the Cayman Islands. My question is, introduced by whom? Understand that Section 69 does not place a positive duty on the government to effect the result of a referendum brought under it. The government is not bound by that resolution. Section 70 is different. The people-initiated referendum, the government is bound by the result of that referendum if more than 50% of the registered voters have voted in favor or against, whatever the question is. So, who's going to be responsible for introducing a national lottery in Cayman? The private sector? The government? Who's going to regulate it? These are matters, sorry ma'am, been so long calling Mr. Madam Speaker, that need to be made absolutely clear in the resolution, because it is from the resolution that the learned Attorney General and his team then have to formulate the question. And the second limb of the resolution, whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized. What are small amounts of cannabis? Madam Speaker, I'm going to vote in favor of this motion. So what I'm saying is not, well, I should say, of a motion in these general terms. So what I'm saying is not trying to argue against the government going ahead with this. I am trying to do my duty as someone who has lived through these sorts of things and lost, even when we did our very best to get the detail right. There is going to be, as sure as I am standing here, there is going to be some significant pushback. There is more likely than not going to be legal challenges to this referendum going ahead. If any of us think that what you are hearing about the national ID thing is anything to worry about, wait till this hits the headlines. So we need, at this stage, to try to get this as right as we possibly can, and to minimize the opportunities for a challenge to be made. Madam Speaker, the other bit that I am concerned about is this issue about decriminalization of the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis. What are we trying to achieve by using a nice word like decriminalization? I was concerned to hear the Premier say that if you are caught with whatever we finally decide constitutes small quantities of cannabis, that there are still going to be consequences. Madam Speaker, we need to call a spade and not try to say a spade is a shovel. Because where am I, if I want to buy some ganja, who am I going to buy it from? It's no shops that I know, at least not proper storefront shops, that you can go buy ganja. The sale of that, whether it's small quantities or not, will continue to be a criminal offense. And if the police catch me smoking a spliff, they're going to say, Mr. McLaughlin, you know, at your age and station in life, you really shouldn't be doing that. We're going to give you an administrative fine. Seriously? Seriously, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, if we have come, or if we are asking the country to take a view on whether or not it is, what is the word I'm looking for? It is acceptable to smoke a little bit of weed, then that's what we need to ask them, that's the question we need to ask them to answer. You ask anybody out there who uses weed whether or not they will be happy with getting an administrative fine and talking to by the police for smoking weed, and see if they tell you that, well, that'll be okay. If we are to be serious about this and to ask, and are asking the country to tell us, the electorate to tell us whether or not it is acceptable to use small quantities of ganja, then we need to ask them the question and let them say yes or no. We'll talk about this concept of decriminalization. I understand conceptually the difference, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a difference without any real distinction. We don't want to own up to the fact that we are saying we believe, the government believes, that it is okay to smoke, to have in possession and smoke small quantities of ganja. That's the question we need to ask. Let the people say yes or no. But the government is going to have to take a position on it. It's not going to be acceptable to tell people, well, I really don't know. You know, I need you to tell me. I'm sorry? My position on both of these is that I believe we should introduce a national lottery. I believe that the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should not be an offense. And I can tell you on my mother's and father's grave, I never smoked, not took one smoke of ganja in my life. Now, don't ask me about whiskey. That's a different story. But I didn't reach this point, Madam Speaker, overnight. Part of my education about this, my two sons, one is now 30 and one is 27. Thankfully, they got over that stage in life. But boy, we had some wars. But I know how young people think. I have listened to the arguments. I used to argue against it. But I'm a realist. I'm a pragmatist, Madam Speaker. And I can tell you, in my experience, smoking ganja don't make no people behave no worse than drinking liquor. In fact, it's the other way most of the time, in my experience. So, all I'm saying to the government is the Premier boasts of not shirking from dealing with the serious issues. Let's deal with them. Let's put the questions there, the proper questions, and see where we get to. But let's ask the questions carefully and precisely. And the government and the Premier, Mr. Premier, you're not going to get away with saying, boy, that's not really my opinion that matters, it's yours. When you become the government, you have to take a position. You are bringing the referendum. You are preparing the questions. No petitions out there that I know about asking for these things to be dealt with. So the government is bringing the referendum motion and ultimately the bill. It needs to decide whether it's going to campaign yes or no in favor of each of the proposed questions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I won't be too long at all. My points on this and the questions that I have received whilst moving about the community are pretty straightforward, and I just wanted to add to what the Honourable Leader from Red Bay has just said, that if we leave this too vague, there's going to be more questions than answers in this referendum. Madam Speaker, on the national lottery, the number one question I get is, where will the funds go? What will the funds be used for? In other countries or other states, I should say, in the United States where they've and other Caribbean islands where they've introduced lotteries, many of those, the funds went to either education or infrastructure or split between the two. I think people out there would like to know that before making a decision on this. If it is just going into general government revenue, I don't think it will receive as much support. The other, for me personally, the other side of it, and that would be in the details, is that it just doesn't simply replace a government budget item, the value, but it actually adds and enhances to that government budget. I know in other countries that has been an issue where the promise was made that it would go to education or be added to the education budget, for instance, but what they did was actually replaced the education budget, and there was no tremendous increase as anticipated in that budget item. The other point I want to raise, Madam Speaker, is I'm not too sure, and I will say this, that not too sure whether this proposal for a national lottery, if that is a once a week or once a day lottery, and or combined with increased fines and penalties, will help or will replace a person's interest in playing the regional lotteries. And I say that, Madam Speaker, I just pulled up Supreme Ventures in Jamaica, one of the ones that are played locally. They have Cash Pot, Hot Pick, Pick 2, Pick 3, Pick 4, Lucky 5, Top Draw, Lotto, Super Lotto, Dollars, and Money Time. So those are all of the lottos available by Supreme Ventures, the lottery provider in Jamaica. So you can actually buy a lottery ticket almost every minute of the day. And that is going to be very difficult for us to compete. I have had suggestions as late as yesterday that perhaps the idea should be to license a few centers that would actually sell these regional lotteries. How you gain revenue from that would have to be something you would have to work out. But I am concerned that with the lack of the details, that persons out there, and I say this, persons out there may vote or support something that, and at the end, feel that they have not gotten what they supported. And then you may have those who may have supported it but do not feel as if they have enough information to make an informed decision or to take a decision one way or the other. On the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis, I think the honorable member from Red Bay went into quite a bit of detail. The one thing I wanted to say is that, again, what would the fines be? Decriminalizing it or not having it on your police record would be one thing, but if the fine remains, I think it's $3,000 or 3 years in jail, and that could be something that you could look at. If the fine remains $3,000 on first possession, because I think that the law actually has where if you're caught a second or third time, the fines increases, and it could be that it's going to be if it remains that your fine on your first offense or your ticket or however they plan to do it is $3,000, then that's not really going to make much sense. But it could also end up being that it's one that escalates if you're caught a second time or a third time. I think it has to be approached similar to traffic tickets if that is what we are going to do. And in other countries, for instance, if you're speeding once, you get a fine. You speeding twice, you get this point system, and by the third time, you're then sent to driver's ed, and you have to attend an actual course, a driver's ed course, because you've been caught 3 times. It may be that we have a graduating system for the consumption of or possession of small amounts of cannabis, where if you are caught 2 or 3 times, you then have to attend counseling or classes to deal with your addiction. So I just wanted to raise those few points, Madam Speaker, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable elected member for Cayman Brac West and Little Cayman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise just to make a few comments on government motion number 3/2022 and 2023. I believe that the outline that the member from Red Bay gave was the preciseness of the question in the referendum is extremely important. The elephant in the room is numbers. And I'm not sure that addressing in this, whereas there has been much debate for many years on the subject of introducing a national lottery, actually takes into account the numbers. So I say this to the Premier, to the mover, that if consideration and explanation on the windup can be given to, we go forward, government goes forward with this referendum, and at the end of the day, there's still been no clear input on what this country feels about numbers. I believe an opportunity would have been missed. So, thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity just to make that comment.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Minister for Culture, Youth and Sports.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Madam Speaker, sitting in the opposition a few times, I remember where we worked hand in hand with the government of the day. I'm starting to see and hope and pray that this is something that it seems to be possible, seeing the advice and guidance that has been given by the opposition. Madam Speaker, I am one of the members who stood on a platform and spoke openly of this. I remember one incident in particular. One of my favorite church elders, I spoke about it at a meeting, And the next day I knew he hadn't been feeling well. I went to his house. Mr. Rupert, Elder Rupert Ebanks, God bless his soul. And I went to him and I said, before you hear the wrong thing, because at that time he was a little upset with me about something else. And I want you to hear exactly what I said. And when I finished explaining what I had said the night before, Madam Speaker, he said, that is foolishness. In the back of my mind, I said, yes. I really didn't expect much different because your age group and everything's not seen why we have to decriminalize. And all of a sudden he said, all the money and time and resources we have wasted. He said, legalize it. I was shocked, Madam Speaker. I went on and gave him my reasons why I felt that was many steps away. Madam Speaker, there were a few reasons why I felt this move was necessary and why it has to go out to the public and we have to discuss this. There are more than one reason. The main thing that it started off with, Madam Speaker, was too many of my young people going to get a job, and because of a simple police record for a spliff, they can't get a job. They can't. I remember when I was 18 years old, the greatest martial artist Cayman has ever seen was caught with a piece of a spliff that they said was his because he dropped it in the sea. When he was 52, had a heart attack and couldn't get to go overseas because of something that happened when he was 19 years old, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I know bright young people who were A's and B students in university and through high school and can't get off to a university because somewhere along their way they made a simple mistake with a spliff and now they can't get off to get a university degree. Too much of this has gone on for too long, and that was my initial step in saying, let us see where we can go with this. But in doing my research and talking to a lot of people who actually went on the boats, who watched stuff coming on the boats, gave me my second reason. And that was, if we allowed someone to grow a few trees in their backyard, hence the less shipping in of big amounts of marijuana, and that is where a lot of our guns and stuff are coming from that's affecting us in this country, Madam Speaker. Those were the reasons. Madam Speaker, I do know research has shown that we cannot allow young people under the age of 18 and 19 to be free willing with this as well. There are the pros and cons on everything. But we have to finally get to the stage where we can discuss it, find what will benefit the people and what will benefit the country in the long run, Madam Speaker. And to the opposition, thank you for seeming to be at least wanting to get on the same page. This is the beginning of the steps that we need to take to help our people. Madam Speaker, thank you very much.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Deputy Premier.
Madam Speaker, I think between the Premier's comments, the honorable comments from the member from Red Bay, and the comments from my ministerial colleague from West Bay North, I think the case has been made as to why we need to move forward with this. So one lesson I remember, Madam Speaker, that I learned from the honorable member from from Red Bay. In my first term, I think he had used the term or coined the phrase to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, or something to that effect. I got it right? Thank you, sir. I tell you, I do listen to you. The thing about it is, Madam Speaker, within the government strategic policy statement that we had delivered in this honorable parliament, we did say, and I just want to quote it here. I didn't plan on really speaking on this motion, but I just decided I had to at least say something on it. So I just want to find the exact spot here. So this is the government's position on at least one section of it is already clear in that regard. And it has to deal with broad outcome number 3, that basically speaks to providing solutions to improve the well-being of our people so that they can achieve their full potential. And under section 3, or broad outcome number 3, Madam Speaker, in particular, subsection 6, that deals with create great employment opportunities for Caymanians, we said in section 868, reduce discrimination against young people in education and employment through decriminalization of marijuana. So it is safe to say, Madam Speaker, that the government's position in that regard was already clear in the strategic policy statement. I can also say to you, Madam Speaker, that without, I guess, giving away the government's position, I think at least some members that I do know of on this side actually support the decriminalization of marijuana. Well, I would actually say all members, because it's actually in our strategic policy statement. But the thing about it is, Madam Speaker, even though we agreed this in our strategic policy statement as something that the government would do, and there are some members within this Honorable House that did campaign on decriminalization of marijuana, we still think that a major decision such as that is one that needs to be taken to the people. And ultimately, whatever it is that the people do decide is ultimately what it is that we in this House will have to accept, because at the end of the day, this is still a democracy, and it's still a democracy where majority rules. Now, I can say to anybody that for me on this side, I'll be campaigning to decriminalize marijuana. Everybody, Madam Speaker, has their own vices. And for me, I can tell anyone, it is, well, I'm not getting into my vices on this floor, but I can guarantee in a marijuana, in a whiskey. But what I can say is that young people will sometimes make bad choices. And what it is that we can't do is allow those bad choices to pretty much haunt them for the rest of their life. I can tell you at the end of the day, I don't smoke. Nobody in my household smoke. As a matter of fact, I can't think of any of my family members that actually smoke. It's something I consider to be unhealthy, but that's my personal position on it. But what I can say is that I also won't be going out there and promoting anyone to use marijuana, because I think at the end of the day, there's still negative effects of it. Just like with anything else, if you abuse it, there will be negative effects. But that is not for my place to do. What this motion is about is recognizing that there are people in our community that, for one reason or the other, do use marijuana on a recreational basis. I have a lot of friends that actually do, and they have even messaged me since the Premier has spoken to say they're very happy to see that the government is actually doing this, and that they'll be going out there to campaign for that. And I respect that. That is their will. We have seen it in other countries where it's been done, and just even recently, the U.S. President Biden actually, I think, write off or basically expunge the record or clear the records of everyone at a federal level that have convictions for marijuana. Granted, it's not, most of those aren't much at the federal level, most of it is actually at the state level, but nonetheless, we even see the U.S. even going in that direction, and even the UK and elsewhere. So it is not something I personally condone. I don't smoke, and I won't tell anyone to go out there and smoke. But at the end of the day, recognizing that people make those choices, and some people, like with everything else, and we are the first in this Christian community to say, yes, we are all sinners, but we saved by grace. That's the reason why we do our salvation, is that we also have to give people an opportunity to not let things haunt them. And in that regard, I can tell anyone that I've seen too many lives destroyed for very small amounts of ganja. People, as my colleague from West Bay North, Minister Bush said, can't go overseas, can't get a clean police record, can't attend university, can't even get a waiver, all different manner of things to stop them from certain opportunities. And again, for mistakes that they would have made or perceived mistakes that they would have made at a younger age. So from that standpoint, I am supportive of it. In terms of the issue of a national lottery, the truth of the fact is, Madam Speaker, earlier this year, my colleague, Minister Turner from Prospect, attended a funeral of a prison officer, a former prison officer that had been unfortunately killed in one of those places that are well known for number selling. And while many of us for years have turned a blind eye to the number game, it was one thing when it was just, was it Honduras and Sundays and Belize during the week? Where $15 on a Sunday will get you $1,000 or something like that. And during the week, $20 will make you win $1,000 or something to that effect. The truth of the fact is, that number, listen, I can tell you, I have a lot of friends, and I do know family members who purchase numbers. I mean, that is, and I'm definitely not going to call in their name, don't worry about that. But it has become an acceptable way of life to some extent. But what we have seen, especially now, and I'm going to say it, and some people may not like it, we have seen these numbers that are running 4, 5, 6, 10 times a day popping up now. It has become a point where we can no longer ignore it. I mean, everyone, there used to be a little rule on the street, if you see a double play on a Sunday, somebody going to get robbed because somebody normally will hit the number man big. And now you're seeing all of these robbery reports showing up now. Places being robbed at all hours of night or sometime all hours of morning. People being relieved of cash all hours of night. I mean, it has gotten a point right now where this is now pushing crime up in this country. And in most cases, a lot of people who are robbed from earnings from numbers can't even report it to the police because they themselves are also engaged in an illegal activity. So it has become a point now, Madam Speaker, that we can no longer sit in this parliament and allow for this to continue to grow without some form of regulation or some kind of involvement by us inside here. It has now become a beast that has escaped us. We have turned a blind eye for it, and we have watched it grow and grow and grow to the point now where we need to do something about it or shut up. Either we enforce the current laws that we have, or we basically find a way to better regulate it, but something has to be done. But leaving it alone is not something that we can now prepare to do. I mean, I am kind of really guarding what I say, recognizing that for my constitutional responsibility from CBC, there are some things that I guess I would be aware of that would not be in the public domain, and I'm trying to make sure I don't cross over into anything that I should cross into. But what I can honestly say, from where I sit and from what I've seen, this is now something that needs to be dealt with. But we have also recognized it has to some extent become a part of the fabric of our community, where there are members within our community who have one way or the other have become dependent on it also. So now we need to sit down and make the decision. If we're going to do it, regulate it properly. We have number guys. I mean, I know some sellers where the commission paid is actually 40%, I think. And some of these guys are making $10,000 a week just on commission. They can't sit down and bank this money. They can't carry it anywhere. They can't even hire proper security. They can't do anything. And anyone who's looking a quick hit or a quick dollar knows exactly who these number places are, and they're going. So at some point now, Madam Speaker, we need to either put up or shut up and deal with this beast once and for all. And if money is going to be made from it, and a lot of people clearly have gotten rich on it, then it's only fair that the public itself or the government itself or whoever it is actually gets something from it. Now, I can tell anyone, I'll be campaigning for the National Lottery. I'll be telling people to vote for it, because at the end of the day, I think it's something that's needed, and I think we can actually raise some revenues from it and even give us an opportunity to even lower tariffs and other fees that we can make elsewhere. But the amount of money now that is being made and being spent on this business has become obscene. It has created another underground economy that needs to be dealt with. So from this standpoint, I do recognize that the motion itself does not answer certain questions. I'm curious too as to the quantities of ganja that would be allowed. You know what I mean? And in terms of a national lottery, is it something that the government should operate, or the private sector? But either way, it's something that will have to be regulated. You know, and I want to thank the member for Red Bay, at least, for also stating his position in terms of working with, well, I got the impression he was willing to work with the government in order to make sure we get the motion right, and then also by extension the referendum bill when it comes right, to make sure that at least we have very little legal challenges, and at the end of the day, the will of the people can be determined from this exercise. But overall, Madam Speaker, I really want to thank my colleagues for making the decision to say, you know what, once and for all, we need to deal with this issue. You know what I mean? I think it's an opportunity, especially in the National Lottery, to create many young Caymanian entrepreneurs now. Many of us travel to the States, we see the gas stations, we see the machines right there. We see when those people do win those $1 billion and $1 million ticket, we see how much is the seller get and all that kind of stuff. So there are opportunities out there, and if we're going to do it, let us do it right, and let us do it where at least our people can also benefit from it, and people can also be protected from it. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we have all heard the stories of whose bank is $2 million and whose bank have this and everything else out there. So at some point, we just need to deal with this issue. And I suspect that it will pass based, if the numbers are right, for the amount of people who actually do buy it. I think it actually should pass, especially on the National Lottery side. But pretty much, Madam Speaker, I just want to thank my colleagues and thank the members opposite, at least for their tacit support in at least trying to find some way to move forward on this. I know that some of the members on that side are also members of the sit on the National Security Council, so they themselves would have seen some of the briefings that we would have seen with regard to the true nature of what it is that we're dealing with. So I am not surprised that they too, in their own unique way, will try to find a way for us to once and for all deal with this, because it is now becoming an issue where too many criminal elements are involved with it. With that, Madam Speaker, I will say my piece, and I thank you all.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member? The Honourable Minister for Tourism and Transport.
Your speech in WhatsApp.
Madam Speaker, thank you for allowing me this privilege to add to the contribution to this discussion on the government's motion in respect to a national referendum on a national lottery, as well as the decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana, legally known as cannabis, and consumption. Madam Speaker, I only rise to acknowledge some of the positions by the opposition as well as by all members here, because it seems that most members are in support of, at the very least, the general attempt of this motion. Madam Speaker, there seems to be some differencing of views in respect to how it should have been done, and I thank the Honourable Sir Alan McLaughlin, the representative for Red Bay, I apologize, I shouldn't have said his name, but the honorable elected member for Red Bay for his input on what I perceive as to be an attempt to help the government to ensure that there's no hurdles in the way and in our attempt. So I am minded or very welcoming for any suggestions by the opposition for places of amendments to this motion so we not have those proposed problems that were highlighted. But Madam Speaker, I'd also say that we have the Honorable Attorney General who is here to guide the government on the best ways to carry out the intent of the government. And Madam Speaker, that takes me to the next point of timing and why there were some questions in respect to why did we change around the order paper today? Madam Speaker, I think the Premier was quite clear to say that both this motion and the gambling bill are related, hence the reason for doing so. But the timing, Madam Speaker, is to try to give the public an understanding of that we respect their viewpoints and want to hear their feedback on, not feedback, but give their input in respect to this very sensitive topic, because we know that there is a bill coming which is proposed to increase the penalties surrounding the activity which is illegal in respect to the numbers game, some people call it the lottery, and you hear the differences of terminology thrown back and forth, but ultimately, Madam Speaker, it's a game of chance in respect to a number being randomly selected, and you take the risk by a certain amount of odds to do so. Madam Speaker, the timing is because we recognize that there is a bill before the House to increase those penalties based on advice to us that the market or the environment of numbers is getting very serious. I think there's no questions about that. I don't think anybody in this House would not agree with that position. So we were advised from a security perspective that something had to change. And Madam Speaker, the reason why the government decided to have this motion is because though we recognize the severity and the seriousness of the criminality surrounding this area, we also know that the input of the people of this Cayman Islands is just as important in respect to this topic. Because, Madam Speaker, I think it would be not appropriate if we do not talk to the people about something that is almost practically accepted by them before implementing harsher penalties, which is the common practice to be a deterrent for any criminal activity is harsher penalties. And Madam Speaker, I don't want to run foul of the standing orders by talking about a bill that is not before us yet, but is intended to come next. But the reason why we put them close together, because there is some overlap, so to speak. And Madam Speaker, that's why we're trying to accomplish this, to say to the people, what we all recognize is a serious problem going on. One of an activity that has been left to its own devices with a piece of legislation that is archaic and an appetite by the people of acceptance, an appetite of turning a blind eye to it, and now a dark force has entered into that environment. Now it's time to do something. But this government wanted to say, before we do that, before we start to further criminalize people for something that they may already be in acceptance for, or willingness or have the appetite to allow to be legal, why don't we ask them first? And Madam Speaker, the Honorable Premier will explain to you that process in his wrap-up or potentially in his contribution to the gambling bill. I hear the honorable member from Red Bay asking if we're withdrawing the gambling bill, but there's been no indications as to that. Madam Speaker, in the attempt to address this issue, Madam Speaker, I apologize. I'm going off track here. The honorable member from Red Bay is misleading my mind in trying to get me off course. But I'm going to try not to fall for the trap. Madam Speaker, in the effort to do what we say we would do for the people, we wanted to be a government that hears from the people and allows the people to have their say in very serious matters. I think we could be doing a whole lot more, but that's the whole point of this motion for a referendum. Madam Speaker, I am certain that everybody in this honorable house have passed the signs in my constituency that already has the formulation of the wording within this current motion presented to ask my people what their thoughts were. And Madam Speaker, the purpose of that was to spark the discussion so people within their organizations, their homes, their churches, their family functions, or cooler talk at work, whatever, to start to discuss the pros and cons. Because that's the way we want to operate within this administration, to be one of listening to the people. Madam Speaker, I went as far as even sending the question to my constituents, because that's how I operate in respect to my constituency when things of this sensitive nature comes up. Madam Speaker, just to give you an idea of how diverse the responses are on these two matters, I compiled 25 responses from my constituents. And, Madam Speaker, I got a whole lot more. As a matter of fact, I got hundreds and hundreds of responses. I think about close to 40% of my voter base. But obviously, I'm not going to read all of them. I just thought that these responses gave a diversity of the viewpoints. I think that these comments will give a diversity of viewpoints in respect to it. And Madam Speaker, the question that I sent out said, should a national lottery be introduced in the Cayman Islands? That was A. And B, should the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis be decriminalized? Response number 1, it says, I'd say no to lottery and yes to cannabis and decriminalization. There is a potential for more persons with addictive personalities to spend more on lottery tickets than they can afford. The reality is that very few persons are going to win the lottery, and studies show that the majority of lottery winners don't hold on to their winnings for very long before they spend it all. It doesn't create lasting wealth, whereas most people spend money on tickets while they would have been better off saving it saving their disposable income. So you get a viewpoint there. Obviously one that not necessarily in favor, but they're in favor for cannabis. So you can see where the interesting point is that they're not all yes or all no. Answer number 2, cannabis should be decriminalized. We have legal substances such as tobacco and alcohol, which are more dangerous. Alcohol and tobacco are associated with increased deaths from road traffic accidents and cancer. Marijuana doesn't carry risk anywhere near as dangerous or deadly. Comment number 3, Madam Speaker. Yes and yes. And when it says yes and yes, it was yes to both questions. These things are and have been illegal for decades, but yet they are still happening. People buy numbers in cannabis daily in the Cayman Islands. Answer number 4. A, yes to a national lottery. It should be introduced. And B, no to cannabis. Answer number 5. A, yes, which is the one to the introduction to a national lottery is yes. And B, initial thoughts is no, but not saying that I can't be convinced otherwise. So basically, I have to flip-flop on this one. So you can see where the opportunity for discussion and information, pros and cons to it, people are starting to think. Answer number 6. A, yes, which is to a national lottery. Government tax the proceeds and use it for infrastructure development, like other countries, roads and schools and health. In respect to answer B, yes, more and more countries globally decriminalized it for personal and medical use. Just put controls around it. Another comment from somebody. Number 7. I'm sure that this is a very hot topic, the person said, but it is evident that the rest of the world has moved on, and like other Caribbean countries. Everything certainly depends on the stringent will of the laws to govern these two areas. Depends on how stringent the laws will be, whether I will agree or not. The laws must be beneficial to increase the income to our country and strict enough that it doesn't destroy our country either. Answer number 8. Yes, Kenneth, it's about time for the lottery. All the churches are gambling too and selling tickets for different things, cars and trips and different things. So I say go for it. Religion has to get with the islands renewed. Sorry, my apologies, Madam Speaker. I say let's go for it. Religion has got this island ruined and other pass on. I don't agree with that one. Religion hasn't ruined the island, but that is a viewpoint of one of my constituents, so I have to respect it. Number 9, my opinion is that cannabis should be accepted because it is helpful to some people if you don't overdo it. My opinion is I would not say yes to a national lottery in the Cayman Islands. Answer 10, yes, yes, simple as that. No hesitation, no questions, no thoughts, yes, yes. So you can tell that some people are simply convinced. Madam Speaker, number 11, answer for A, if churches and nightclubs and some organizations are allowed to hold raffles, then what is a raffle? A glorified name for lottery. Simple. Answer to B, we have long passed the age of British penalization. Most of European parts of the U.S. have adopted these changes years ago. Likewise, the West Indies' draconian measures are a thing of the past, Kenneth. Cayman needs to wake up. Man up. Man cannot change time. Time shall change man. I love my constituents so much because they always keep me on my toes. Answer number 12. The lottery, I think, is no. Not a lot of families, the lottery, I think, not a lot of families will go hungry when they lose all of their money, when you go gamble and want to try a little thing. Oh boy, I love my constituents so much. You win this based on the Christian country we had founded upon the seas, after all, on these topics. So this person doesn't seem to be in favor of either one. Answer number 13, yes, but do studies on countries with small-sized populations with lotteries to see how effective it has been done for them. And B, yes, and wipe records of all people who have been incarcerated for small amounts of marijuana and criminal records. Interesting point. We can help a lot of young men who have had a police record already. Madam Speaker, I want to pause there for a second because the honorable member from Red Bay said something while my other colleagues were speaking, and he made a relevant point. It's not only about the records today for jobs in Cayman, but once you put that record down, you can't leave Cayman. And Madam Speaker, believe it or not, I can speak from personal experience. And I know that the opposition was waiting ever so much to find out whether I'd had a visa or not to travel as the Minister of Tourism. I heard the whispers. I had to sneak and hide that I didn't have my visa yet. So luckily, when I became the Minister of Tourism, we were in the pandemic, and it was good reason to hide it and say, well, boy, we don't got to go nowhere. While my Honorable Premier, as a great leader that he is, worked behind the scenes with the Deputy Governor to get me to Jamaica to get my visa sorted out. Because what an embarrassment it would be as the Minister of Tourism and can't travel to the United States. It made me sad for many, many months because I was unsure if I would get it. And I want to thank the Deputy Governor and the Governor's Office for assisting me with that. Because now I can happily say today I'm proudly representing the Cayman Islands, promote the tourism product. But my point is, Madam Speaker, is that I have the luxury of a whole government and a governor, deputy governor, and a premier behind me. Many of my young Caymanians don't have that luxury, where they can call the right people to get the appointment done, or even to say, well, boy, you know, there's diplomatic elements here. It's a minister of a country. They'll go, I don't know who this young man or young woman is from Cayman. They smoke marijuana. We're not letting them in. That's what our young people have to face. You know, they could miss the opportunity for school. Even worse than that, if they had to be traveled out of this country for a life-saving procedure, and they said, sorry, you can't get on the plane. It's not just as serious as the criminality surrounding the area of marijuana. I say it is, but again, I think the people should have their say. And I will address the point that the honorable member from Red Bay said about government has to take a position. I'll do that shortly. Going on to the next one, 14. The answer was, yes, I believe it could potentially have a very good source of revenue for the country. And the answer to B, I support decriminalization. It would allow us to treat individuals' drug use as a health and a social issue instead of a legal issue. Interesting point. Number 15, not sure, sir. Important viewpoint, though. That's why it's good to have these debates. Madam Speaker, you see what I do in my community, in my constituency? I make them talk. They might like it because some of them said, Kenneth, so what happened now? You like gambling or what? And I said, no, ma'am. I just want you to start thinking about it because it's a topic for discussion. And then another one said, so you promoting smoking marijuana? And this goes back to the point I was just highlighting with the honorable member from Red Bay. They're saying that the government has to take a position. I disagree, Madam Speaker. The government does not have to ask the people what their position is by taking a position. And I think that's why this side of the government is in control today. Because we believe in the independent viewpoint of the people. We don't have to persuade them either way. You've heard some members say they will be convincing people to do so. I don't think it's necessary for me to do that. I think that just by the mere fact of bringing up the topic, allowing the discussion, allowing the opportunity to have a vote, people are thereby forced to think. You got to go there and vote about something. You're going to go in and just vote yes or no to something you haven't thought about? No. People are going to do what they naturally do. Go, Minister, what do you think about this gambling thing? What do you think about the marijuana thing? And they're going to talk. And then they're going to ask people that they respect. They're going to come to the Honorable Speaker in West Bay and say, Madam Speaker, I think that the marijuana thing may be good because, the kids, we don't want to mess them up, but I'm not sure if there's any negative stuff. And you can say, well, here's some good, here's some bad. What is your thoughts? That's what democracy is. And I'm certain, Madam Speaker, that there's going to be people in the community who have their positions and there will be discussions publicly. I can give you one prime example, Madam Speaker. I am certain, well, I'm not sure if I can say certain anymore because he is a board member now, but a former member of this parliament, the Honorable Gilbert McLean, was a major proponent for national lottery. He was talking about it publicly on the radios. I think he might have even had a meeting or two. I stand to be corrected on that. But I can see somebody who is in support of that, organizing media campaigns, pros for a national campaign. And I can also see the flip side of that, Madam Speaker, whereby you have the church's viewpoint on what the good book says in respect to gambling. And I'm certain that the Ministers Association will put out a statement on their position. So there's going to be many sources of information for the people to think and come to a conclusion on. You will have the National Drug Council come back and give studies on the radios talking about how marijuana affects the mind, or whether it should be for young people, or should we wait till they're old enough, over the age of 21 or over the age of 18, based on the medical effects on the body. So we don't have to persuade them one way or the other. Matter of fact, what we're trying to do, Madam Speaker, is respect the democracy of this country, whereby the majority rules. That's what the intent of this motion is trying to do. So I don't agree with the viewpoint that we have to take a position. If they want to do it in secret, each member, no problem with that. Everyone has their own viewpoint. Because guess what? Each one of us in this honorable house is a voter. I hope everyone on there registered. Ms. Heather, you registered? Absolutely, she says. Madam Speaker, let me continue on with these answers, because I want to go into some other areas and topics. Answer number 16 to the first part of the question. It says, let's be real. There are already multiple lotteries in the Cayman Islands, so I say yes to a national lottery. Should be implemented, and that would be to the benefit of the people of the Cayman Islands. The funds could be used for education, mental health care, drug rehabilitation, and some other worthwhile projects. In respect to the answer for B, that deals with marijuana, it says, the consumption of cannabis for recreational purposes should be decriminalized for anyone over the age of 17 years old. For an adult, cannabis is less harmful than alcohol, yet alcohol is legal. Interesting point. The quality of cannabis being sold could be monitored. That's a very complicated system that we'd have to implement for that. If you want to monitor the quality of it, like the honorable member from Red Bay said, well, where are they going to get it from? So there's a lot to think about here. The cannabis being sold could be monitored if issued from a licensed dispensary, which would reduce the number of bad batches. I know what bad batch is, because I guess this is not terminology. The major issue is that cannabis / marijuana / ganja, whatever you want to call it, is being given to our children in schools. Their brains are not fully developed, and marijuana usage could cause developmental issues. The issue will remain even if cannabis is decriminalized. More efforts need to be placed on preventing drug, not just ganja, dealing within our schools for our kids. Madam Speaker, I'm not going to go through the whole 25 because we're going to be here all day, but you get the point. The point is that the people have views. They ain't stupid to this. This topic has been around from at least as long as I've been alive, and I'm 42 years old, Madam Speaker. From as long as I started to understand what ganja was, and I think that must have been about 8 or so before I understood what the senior guys in the community were talking about when they said ganja. I say, oh, that stink thing that you smell when you're down by a certain area. So if you take away 7 from 42, you give you 35. At least 35 years they've been talking about this matter, right? So it's time for us to finally make the people have their say. Madam Speaker, I want to deal with another component of this motion where I think it's so important for us to get a direction from the people on the national lottery. Because you heard me say that the Christian community may have a viewpoint on this. and some of it was reflected in those comments about raffles compared to gambling. And I must say, Madam Speaker, I kind of in agreement. I wasn't here as a member of parliament when this law was made, or the last change of it. But I do see where a person can come to the conclusion, as per the definitions within the gambling law. And Madam Speaker, let me explain what I mean by that. It says in the definitions, lotteries, by definition, says, includes any game, method, or device whereby money or money's worth is distributed or allotted in any manner depending upon or to be determined by chance or lot, held, drawn, exercised, or managed, whether within the islands or in any other country or place outside the islands. Thank you, sir. Now, that's the definition of lottery. The ones that I have issue with is these two, and I think I've said this in this honorable house before, which is gambling and raffles. Now you tell me, Madam Speaker, because I know the common person can't tell the difference, but I think the legal mind said that there's a fundamental difference. And this is where we have a lot of criticisms of the law and of the government from the people. It says, gambling means to play any game, whether of skill or chance, for money or money's worth. That's gambling. Raffle means the sale of a numbered ticket, one or more of which is drawn at random for the awarding of a prize. And Madam Speaker, I'm certain if you ask a Christian, they're going to say they're the same thing. No matter how, how they say, a horse of a different color. How do you go? Same dog puppy. Thank you, Madam Minister. Same dog puppy. That's what they say. So while we are here, in many people's eyes, and I'm not saying that the law is wrong, you know. I'm not a lawyer. This is done by professionals who understand legalese and the interpretation of it for the judges to interpret whether gambling and raffling is two different things. Now, obviously, that must be the case because we have it within our laws. But if the people believe that they're the same thing, and we are allowing the raffling, but we want to penalize the gambling, which is the local lotteries, you see how the people's viewpoint of us is hypocritical. And I'm not sure, Madam Speaker, whether I want to say if I agree, but there's a high chance that I think they might be on to something there. I think they might be on to something. How can you say that it's okay to have a chance to win a substantial amount of value for good cause, but it's not okay and you can go to prison because you want to do it for your own reasons or you want to get the monies to buy food for your children? To buy food for the children, and that's what some of my people tell me. Whether we like it or not, I've heard my constituents say, Ken, if I never buy a little $3 worth, I wouldn't have enough money to go to Foster's. Puts me in a rock and a hard place because I am basically trying to say to my people, that's something illegal, you can get arrested. I don't want you to get in trouble. It is a bit of an issue, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's an issue that we need to rectify because the referendum will do one major thing, is to quantify the value and viewpoint of our people. We have not, at least in a very long time since this gambling law came into play. Forgive me, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe that the law, the gambling law or gambling bill was created in 1964, somewhere around in the 60s. That would be almost 80 years ago. Let me say, no, sorry, 60. Sorry, my numbers are off back today. 60 years ago. And there was an amendment in 2017, but that's where those definitions came in. But the substantial law and the penalties around it hasn't changed in that time when the amendments happened in 2016. So that's why we're having situations today where a person is caught with a ticket, charged $10, and people go, well, I don't know money, so they take the risk to do it. Right? That is no penalty. Hence the reason we were advised from those who give us advice on security matters that we're supposed to increase it, hence the bill. But I lost my frame of mind there, Madam Speaker. But I got it back. Got it back quick as that. It went out and came right back in. Madam Speaker, Wi-Fi connection came out. I was buffering. Madam Speaker, the reason I pointed that out is the last time we have had any true quantified view of our people was when the bill was created in 1960. So we as legislators have no idea how the people feel about this matter. We come inside here with our subjective views. That one from down, they say, boy, they say it should be legal. That one over, they say, no, they can't do it down there. All of us going on our personal feelings. And that's not what the park is about, Madam Speaker. Matter of fact, let's forget about that. Let's just say for a minute, we weren't going to ask the people any questions. I wonder if we recall our SPS. You said something like that? Yeah. Okay, my Honorable Deputy Premier has highlighted, so, but for emphasis sake, in broad outcomes number 3 on page 52 of the government strategic policy, which was delivered just over a year ago, under number 6H, it says, reduce the decriminalization against young people in education and in employment through the decriminalization of marijuana. Madam Speaker, what we're saying is, which the government, the opposition have disappeared from the debate. I guess I'm not good that they don't got to worry about what I'm saying, or they just don't like what I'm talking about. I don't know. Either way, they saw the government's strategic policy statement. They saw that line in here. So I suspect by them not saying anything, they're doubling down as if they did today to say they are in support. And I am thankful for them for understanding what the government's intent is. But though we say we would like to address this because we think this is a way to do it, it's still the people's choice. Because, Madam Speaker, maybe you haven't heard this part yet. The government is of the view that if the people come back by way of majority to say no to any one of these topics, then we will do nothing about those. But more so to double down to make sure that they continue to be illegal. Now, that's the people's choice. That's what democracy is, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, I want to say something about our Honorable Premier. We had a couple of fights over the last week in respect to this bill, gambling bill, and the motion that's coming up. And, boy, honest to God, and I'm sure how he never strangled me during those things. He's a very patient person. I hope I can learn some of it. But I, for Donna Bryan, my patience, I don't have a high level of patience, so maybe that's why he's the premier. But for him to come here and fight for something that I know that many of people that support him will go, Premier Panton, how would you be there supporting this inappropriate behavior about gambling or weed? I know he must get so many people calling him and messaging him about that. But he understood that the government that he leads wants the people to have their say. And he didn't have to agree as the premier to accept and go out there and have this difficult conversation about a national lottery or marijuana at a time when the people are saying, you know what one of my comments were? And I know he gets it. Man, you sending me a message about marijuana and gambling, and now you're starving to debt, and the cost of living going up, and now what you talking to me about? I know he gets it. So I give him credit for still holding fast rather than saying, Minister, ministers, parliamentary secretary, members of my team, this is not a top priority right now. I see the Honorable Deputy Premier has highlighted a very good point, which is what we're doing. You must be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So we're not saying that those other problems are not top priorities for us. They are. It hurts us, Madam Speaker, when we know that the cost of living is so high, and I feel like going up to the United States and talk to the President and say, what are you doing about the inflation? Because when you sneeze, I catch a flu, I catch corona. But there is only so much we can do, and we're doing as much as we possibly can. And I'm begging Chris every day, can we get a little bit more money to give away? Give me a little bit more money to give back to the people. But Chris said, listen, we have to manage the money right. So we're trying to do that. And anyway, my point was, getting back to the Honorable Premier, I want to thank him for being committed to that, because the governor, who is responsible for security, has asked us to look at this matter in respect to the illegal behavior around numbers. And I want to take this opportunity to tell the family members of those persons who have been affected or have lost a loved one due to crimes surrounding this, how horrible the government feels that you have gone through that. And we will continue to pray for you, to give you strength to be able to live with that loss or that experience. And we recognize that it's a problem. So we recognize that you can't just leave it the way it is. Madam Speaker, it's either the people say we're going to legalize this thing and then give those who are involved or who wish to be involved by selling numbers, whether they want to have a permit to do it, whether we license premises to sell the numbers, at least they will be awarded all the security measures that are needed to keep themselves and other lives safe. For example, Madam Speaker, when an illegal person sells numbers, they don't get the luxury of calling a Brinks truck to come pick up the money. They don't get the luxury of having a security guard on duty to keep them safe, or at least legal security. Good point.
Honorable Member. I have received notice that it is the wish of members that the business of the House continue beyond the hour of 4:30. Can I have a motion for the suspension of the standing orders?
Madam Speaker, thank you. I move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 to allow the business of the House to continue beyond the hour 4:30.
The question is that Standing Order 10-2 be suspended to enable the business of the House to continue beyond the hour of 4:30. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The House will continue beyond the hour of 4:30. Honorable Minister for Tourism and Transport, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was talking about the current state of play with people who sell illegal numbers and why they are targeted, I guess you could say. And it's because the inability to use the provisions available to any other business in the Cayman Islands to protect themselves from opportunists. Because, Madam Speaker, though people rob There's a particular reason why they're robbing the number man. And as I was alluding to before the break, that is because the security measures awarded to the average person who does something in a legal way is not awarded to those who done it in a legal way. For example, you don't have a security guard, at least a legal security guard, to protect you. You don't have the ability to use camera footage to catch a criminal. You don't have the ability to have a Brinks truck come and pick up your money. You don't have the ability to deposit your earnings or the amounts that you collect into a legitimate bank account. You're always at risk because you have to compile it in raw cash, because you can't, what they call in the financial services or financial industry, I guess, what they call wash it. You can't legally put it into the system. So they become vulnerable. And the criminals are smart. They know that. They know. They know that when they come for you that you can't say nothing because you're admitting to a crime yourself. Madam Speaker, what the opportunity of having that legalized does is to potentially reduce the probabilities of criminality. For example, that same number person who's selling the numbers in the corner gets a license from government, pays a fee for it. The revenues they make, a percentage goes to health care or to housing or to our senior citizens and their health care programs or the pension or our kids' school fees or whatever it is it goes to. That person then gets the opportunity to be in a legitimate business. They can advertise that the tickets are sold here. They can have a security guard on duty. They can report the crime if they were to ever be robbed and give a statement to the police without fear of being penalized. They can deposit their monies into a legal account whereby they will not be considered proceeds of a crime. They will also have the ability to have a Brinks truck come and pick the money up. Just like a restaurant selling food, just like a food store, a shoe store that does their selling of their products, just like any supermarket on island. So, Madam Speaker, there's an opportunity here to resolve the criminality surrounding the numbers game. That's the emphasis of the timing that the opposition was talking about. Why the timing? What's the timing? The problem with the time? The problem is we need to figure out a way to reduce the crime, the loss of life that surrounds this very sensitive topic, Madam Speaker. And there is two ways to do it. One, we can legalize it, award all the security measures available for those who are involved in it, that it doesn't become attractive to criminals anymore. Or we can increase the penalties surrounding it that those who are involved in it are afraid to be involved in. And Madam Speaker, I dare say, I don't think that's going to happen. I believe that the appetite for the numbers game or national lottery is so high in this country because of 60 years of not talking to the people about it, and because we've turned our eyes, our nose about this behavior for so long that you get allegations of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service members buying numbers, that you could not potentially reduce the demand for this behavior by simply increasing the penalties. Because if you say, Madam Speaker, oh, if you buy a ticket, you got to get $2,500 in a fine. The question is, you still need to catch them. My good colleague, I won't call his name, has just advised me that's only $45 worth of a ticket, and you can cover your ticket price if you get caught by the police. And Madam Speaker, I haven't highlighted the fact that if we were to legalize the national lottery, if a person is caught, they won't have a criminal record. Madam Speaker, I have a situation right now. It totally slipped me. One of my most important, I wouldn't say it like that, somebody that is dear to me in my constituency who helped me get elected. I remember sending a message to the Honorable Deputy Governor. I said, Deputy Governor, one of my constituents has a little criminal record for buying one ticket. $10! And she needed to go to the States. I said, DG, what can you do for me? Is there any way within the law of the expungement law, there's room for this to be expunged? He called me back. He said, sorry, Minister, the law doesn't allow. No Disney. It wasn't Disney World she was going to, man. But I felt so terrible to tell her, because of something that could potentially be perceived in her mind, somebody goes to buy a raffle for a nonprofit, which she sees as exactly the same thing, buys it every day, promoted on the radios, promoted in the newspapers, to do that. But she can't go away to leave this country with her children because she has a $10 ticket. What am I supposed to say to her, Madam Speaker? She didn't go because she couldn't go. The law didn't allow. And these are the type of things that the people are talking about. Madam Speaker, is this motion formulated in the best way possible? Maybe not. But the thing that the Premier highlighted, Madam Speaker, was that this was a general position, that the details that the opposition spoke about, as in what the definition of small amounts mean, will come in a substantial bill that will go for a referendum. The Premier clearly said that. I heard him. Did anybody else hear him say it? I heard him. So he highlighted the fact that it is not in detail, and the detail will come when the written bill that actually specifies what the question is and what the definitions are in the bill. So there's no need for all of that full detail at this time. Now, granted, the opposition has a good point, as there's a lot more to think about in respect to this. I agree with them, and I accept that, and I thank them for highlighting that, because we're in this together as a parliament to talk about this topic. But what we will have to do in this moment is agree that we will develop something that we think is feasible for the people to vote on within a sentence structure, to say, this is what you would get, and here's the question, yes or no for these two topics. And what it also has allowed, Madam Speaker, is the public is already talking about it. So I am certain that the opposition, its leader, the Premier, his government, his ministers, his parliamentary secretary, and the civil service arm will be bombarded with viewpoints of what offerings should be available in the country. And I'm certain that the research is already being started for the potential of these things coming into fruition, whether that may be decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana. What is the common definition of small amounts in any one of these other jurisdictions? I'm certain that there's legal statute in a Commonwealth country somewhere where there's a legal argument as to what is considered to be a small amount that we can put within the bill. And I'm quite sure there's going to be loads of information provided to all members about what kind of national lottery could be effective for this country, or if it's going to be effective at all. So those details will come. The details will come. What is more important, Madam Speaker, is that the people have an opportunity to have their say. I don't believe, Madam Speaker, with something as sensitive as this, something that has been almost the norm for so long, that we were to have changes in respect to these areas without consulting them. And there's no better way to consult them than direct involvement on a vote. And that's what the PAC administration is going to do. Madam Speaker, boy, it's been a long time since I debated. Oh, that felt good. I'm going to leave it there and allow the other members who may want to give contribution or for the Honorable Premier to wrap up and give clarity to some of the concerns highlighted by the opposition. But I want to say this, Madam Speaker. I thank the opposition because I do believe their viewpoints or their criticisms wasn't negative criticisms, but more so points for us to consider if we want this to be successful. Matter of fact, I acknowledge the honorable member from Red Bay, Sir McLaughlin, viewpoint that he supports both consumption of small amounts of marijuana. He supports that, and he also supports a national referendum. So I respect him for publicly saying that, because some people are not going to say, you know, they want the leverage of being able to say, well, I never say I supported it. So it takes bravery, and I heard my honorable member, DP, said so too. So it takes bravery to come out, because there's going to be people who are against and for this. So I appreciate his honesty. I assume that the comments by the honorable member from Red Bay is a reflection of all the opposition. I don't recall the leader of opposition saying that position. It'd be good to know if that position is the position of all members of opposition, and for them to publicly say so, because you know what could happen, they'll say, well, it only was the one member said so. I would really like for them to potentially highlight that, because the government has said the position on behalf of the government. Maybe the leader of opposition would like to do the same. Madam Speaker, that's my wrap-up. Thank you for the opportunity to give my contribution to this honourable House on the motion, the government motion before us, in respect to referendum on a national lottery and on decriminalization of consumption and possession on a small amounts of cannabis, better known as ganja or marijuana. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Madam Speaker, thank you for allowing me to get up and make a short presentation. I wasn't going to speak, but after hearing so much from both sides, I thought that I let my voice be heard. Madam Speaker, I think we need to be honest here about one thing, is that there is a divide amongst in age. The older people in this country, or in many other countries, are more conservative. The younger people are more open and tolerant. I think that is a fair assessment. I must confess, and if most are honest, they will agree that it was I, though I hate to use that phrase, it was I, but it was me who brought the motion some 13 years ago, possibly 12 to 13 years ago, in terms of a second chance motion, and it was that intention. We were the only country in the world that didn't have a second chance motion. And persons came to myself from not only my constituency, or Borden Town at the time, but from other constituencies, and the problems that they possessed in trying to, many of what you've heard, trying to leave the country for education or recreation or otherwise. They had no way to expunge their records, Madam Speaker. And there was a young man who came to me in his 20s, Madam Speaker, at the time, came to me showing me his acceptance to university right in Florida. And he could not get a clean police record. And that was very painful after we wrote to the relevant authorities, and there was no way for him to have it expunged at the time. that was very hard to see someone's dream just going down the pipeline because of a restriction that he had on his police record, a mistake he had made as a teenager. And I felt it to the core, Madam Speaker. I had another situation, Madam Speaker, of a gentleman who could not travel to Miami because he did not have a visa and needed to do so for medical treatment, and had to do whatever else was afforded to him, secondary treatment. These are some of the reasons, and not only just that, but many other people who came to me, and I realized that we had a problem. Now we can say that we now have a process for records being expunged. I thank the many members over the years who have worked on this, especially the Attorney General's office, and the support of the government at that time. Mr. Speaker, I agree that we need to do something. Sorry, Madam Speaker, my apologies. These things grow on you. I was Madam and then Mr. and now Madam again. So I do apologize. But when it comes to decriminalization of marijuana or weed or ganja or spliff or blunt or whatever they call them, we really need to think about what we're doing, but I think it is a step. I think we have to take things in steps rather than just going straight into full legalization. I don't think that the country is fully ready for that yet, but that's the people's choice to vote on that if a referendum presents itself. So I must confess that I've never smoked. Seeing what had happened around me, I chose not to. Many of the people around had smoked. In fact, a lot of people in my area around my age had never smoked marijuana. So, in fact, we didn't have any peer pressure at all growing up in my area. We were told not to do it by the older guys, which was very good, and I thank them for that. But, Madam Speaker, we need to find a way. We need to do something about it. It's not going away. I don't think that persons who done something as a teenager should be in their 30s suffering, can't leave the island for university or for medical treatment, to be just stuck here because they can't get a clean police record. So, in essence, this referendum is about national lottery and decriminalization of small quantities of cannabis. Not going to say much more on the marijuana issue, but what I must say, Madam Speaker, is that in both situations, all we're doing is if we keep up at this rate, almost every Caymanian will have a criminal record. And most won't be able to travel if that is what they desire. Madam Speaker, in terms of the lottery, or the national lottery, We need to give the public their wishes and don't ignore our responsibilities to our people. If we have a legal lottery, persons, as has been said before, can be protected if they so wish to do so. We need to ensure that it's properly regulated. Mr. Speaker, I've had representation from my constituents who pay close attention to all that is going on with the government and what motions and bills they're bringing, and they always send comments, and I have them, and I keep them very close, and it forms part of how I deliberate. I have to listen to my people, and some of the things my people were saying is that if we're spending the money to do a referendum, we may as well add pepper spray to it and other equipment to protect oneself as crime is rising. Women are asking and been asking for it. I'm just giving you some of the information that persons in my constituency are messaging to me and writing to me. Mr. Speaker, sorry, Madam Speaker, I had to write that down. The numbers game will continue no matter what. My fear is that if we increase the penalties and there's no other opportunity for them to voice, and I'm glad that the Premier was brave enough to give us the opportunity to have a referendum. And I think that that's what the people want, to have their opportunity to voice their opinions on both of these matters, which have been issues that governments over the past have been talking about, and many has been scared to touch it because it's one that could make you lose votes either here or there. So I am happy to be a part of this government that is at least making an effort to give persons an opportunity. Is it perfect? Nothing is perfect, but it's a step in the right direction in giving persons, doesn't matter what my personal belief is, we have been sent here as servants to our people, and we need to listen to their concerns. We may come in, we may have different ideologies, and the people might say, look, that is what you think, but here is what I want you to do. And we need to listen, and I think we need to be reminded as elected representatives that we are here to work on behalf of the people. I think sometimes we all forget that because we have our ideas. Everyone grew up with different ideologies, and some of us go to church, some of us don't. Some of us smoke, some of us don't. Some of us drink alcohol, some of us don't. And we all have different beliefs, you know. And everybody knows the circumstances around gambling. It can be addictive. In the US and other places, they have counseling centers where persons can go and get help, etc. It's addictive for some people who can't control themselves and just think that that next $10 is going to be the right shot. So we need to ensure that anything we do, it comes with that kind of education, that people understand it. Madam Speaker, just going back a little bit, and I'll tell a little personal story. At 11 years old, my son is in his 20s now, and at 11 years old, I sat down and had a conversation with him Well, I must admit I told him that, he's 11 now, he's going to soon be 12, and that there's no more talking now that me and him going to fight. Because if he does anything wrong, there's no more talking now because he's old enough, getting old enough. But we made a deal. He didn't even know half of what I was talking about, but I says, look, if you don't drink or smoke until you're 17 years old, I'll buy you a car. So, Madam Speaker, at that time, I can tell you, I wasn't in no position to afford nothing. But he didn't know that. But I wanted him because I know the effects. I've read about it, the effects on young children, the effects on teenagers, brains, smoking and drinking before a certain age. The results are there. And we all need to protect our children and grandchildren and give them this information so that they can know the dangers of smoking and drinking, whether it's cigarette or otherwise, before a certain age. And I made that agreement with my son, and every year my son reminded me, Daddy, remember our agreement? When I reached 17, I said, yeah, but Zach, you're only 12 years old. But he reminded me every year. So that was my tactic. That won't work for everyone. But I'm just saying that I try to protect my child from the dangers that I know are out there. Because if you go to the Drug Council and you get the statistics, you will realize that children are attempting things at a much younger age now. A much younger age. So we need to do as much and give our children as much information to protect them, or to at least educate them. We're not going to always be with them, but at least they're armed with information that if they make a decision, they know possibly what could happen. Some people are lucky. Some people smoke one time and they turn plump crazy. Some people have one drink and they're never the same. Some people are lucky. That's why I tell them, don't do it. Or unlucky. So, Madam Speaker, my little contribution here, not as long as the Honorable Liz Truss, but Madam Speaker, we have a problem, and I'm glad that the Premier and the team, the government, chose to take it on. Some may say this, and some may say that. Some may say it's use this approach, not that one. And we also have to think about it, Madam Speaker. If we decriminalize ganja or cannabis, as said earlier, and I've always been saying it, where are the persons getting the ganja from to smoke? So should they be growing what they smoke in their backyards? Or smoking what they grow? I know that'll probably make a TikTok. They love me so much. But, so we need to think about that. Are we decriminalizing this thing to make someone else's economy better? I want us to think about that. Madam Speaker, that is my small contribution, and I hope that we never have to be like Greece many years ago, who had to use the numbers from the underground world, illicit activities to balance our budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I too sat here and pondered whether or not I should lend my contribution to this motion that's tabled and being discussed as we are speaking now. I was elected on the slogan, "Be your voice, your hope, your choice." I don't intend to be very long. I believe in being concise and just getting to the point. But the position to which I hold as Minister of Health, Wellness and Home Affairs, it would not have been in its entirety right for me to have not lent my contribution, which, for the record, unprepared because I believe in speaking from the heart. The elephant in the room doesn't go away in regards to the subject matter at hand. I am a child of the soil, raised up, and the referendum in its tabled form, this motion, referendum on national lottery and decriminalization of small quantities of cannabis, is a mere step of showing, and I'm going to go very Caymanian, the gumption of this government. The gumption of this government to give the people their voice. It's not that this is how we're going to lead as an elected government, but because of the very nature and sensitivity of the subject at hand, the very nature that I refuse and I don't wish to attend another funeral. As my honourable colleague, the Deputy Premier, stated, I attended a very sad funeral of someone who lost his life, of what right now that has been available to us has to deal with the very subject matter, one part of the subject matter that is before us today. And in a funeral, we got claps and saying and making a promise to the people that we will do something. We were applauded of saying that we will be your voice. But this will be done collectively with giving the people their chance to also help steer us in taking us forward. As the honourable colleagues have said, whether or not we will get it 100% right at the beginning, maybe not. But again, it goes back to the very same reason that we're sitting on this side of this honourable house by giving the people their choice and say. And it is for that I will support this motion in its entirety. And I'm quite sure that the Honourable Premier, when he's doing his closing arguments, will expound that much more as to how we will move forward. And I am looking forward to the discussions, as so rightly stated here on the floor by my honourable friend from Red Bay, in stating, taking a stance of some sort. It's a matter of provoking the discussions. And I'm really looking forward in engaging with the people of the Cayman Islands. It doesn't matter what electoral district you are from. Once you are a registered voter, you will be able to participate in this referendum. And I am looking for, and I will make myself available to the people of the Cayman Islands to discuss this very same bill as we move forward in our democracy, because this is what democracy is. Thank you for giving me this time.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, does the honourable mover of the motion wish to exercise his right of reply?
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I do not intend to be very long, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have had a range of contributions. Sometimes I couldn't figure out whether we were debating something entirely different. But obviously there's a lot of perspectives, there's a lot of passion, a lot of interest. Madam Speaker, I think I've been very clear in my initial remarks on the motion as to the process, as to the timing. I know that questions were raised around what happens if there isn't a sort of very clear majority one way or the other on either one of the issues. Madam Speaker, those are questions that we will have to take a view on at the time. We all understand that this is not a binding referendum. This is something which is a sounding. This is something which is an attempt by us to get the views of the people of the country on these 2 points, on these two matters that we say are matters of national importance. Madam Speaker, if in relation to the first question, if there is a, and this is, I just want to make this point very clear first. What we have done in terms of this motion is an attempt to outline broadly what the issue is, not to be very narrow and not an attempt to outline exactly what the question is. This is what you do when you bring the bill forward and you have decided exactly how the question is phrased in relation to the matter that has been the subject of the motion, the subject of the resolution of this House. So, Madam Speaker, we have, I must be catching, I sat there and heard it too many times, I guess. Madam Speaker, this is an attempt to get engagement with the people, to get the views of the people. I think all members who have spoken have acknowledged and reflected that. But I think there has been too much of a focus not on what we're talking about now in terms of the motion and the specific resolution that we're seeking, but a focus on issues that naturally fall down the road. Madam Speaker, one of the members from the opposition was discussing what happens in terms of a judicial review or lawsuit or whatever it was, however it was described. How is that going to happen in relation to this referendum? Yes, you can see that happening on the bill, you can see that happening down the road, but not at this point. It is very difficult to see how this kind of issue at this point would give this sort of concern, Madam Speaker. This isn't going to prejudice anybody right now. We're asking for views of the people of the country. This is not going to commit. This is not going to prejudice anybody. If they want to have objections down the road, well, that's entirely possible. We can't speak to that. We can't even necessarily anticipate it. May happen, may not. Madam Speaker, There were some comments made along the lines of it being brave, courageous, similar words, similar descriptions to people stating what their position was on both matters, and saying that, for example, that for consumption and possession of small amounts, it should be completely legal, suggesting we should legalize it. Madam Speaker, if that was an option, I might be one person who wouldn't object to it either. I personally am not sure that a referendum is needed on an issue like this, either one of them, if we do the work properly, Madam Speaker. But we are in a situation where we are not in a position to make a decision as to whether it can be, whether the possession and consumption of small amounts, whatever that ends up being. And as I've said during my initial contribution, we have lots of precedents, lots of indications everywhere from Jamaica to Belize to Canada to US, and you can spin around the Caribbean and find probably quite a few others as well. So that's not really a problem for us, Madam Speaker. What is a problem is that we cannot legalize possession or consumption of even small amounts. We can't, we do not have that option. That is what Bermuda was trying to do. That is what BVI was trying to do. Yes, they were trying to, in some cases, trying to do more than that. They were dealing with cultivation and all sorts of other circumstances surrounding it. But we know that that doesn't work because we are subject to a UN convention that restricts our ability to legalize in that way. That's why the option for us is to decriminalize. And that's possibly the case for many other countries where decriminalization is the concept that is utilized. Perhaps if they had the complete freedom to be able to do it, they may not be talking about decriminalization. They may be talking about full legalization of very small amounts. We do not have that option. Hence the reason we talk about decriminalization and not having, at the end of the day, we can decide what the penalties are, what the administrative penalties, administrative fines are. We can decide that. What we can't do is to just completely make it legal. So, Madam Speaker, I think having said that, I'm not sure that there are a lot of other issues that I heard which required a response. I do beg your indulgence one moment. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the final point I've been reminded of is that we, government, does not want to be too prescriptive at this point as to exactly what the question would be, because there are a variety of choices. There's not a binary choice here. We've heard so many different opinions and views. We've had representations made which reflected the actual views of some constituents. So we can see that there are a broad range of interpretations and understandings and perspectives. And at this point, it would not suit us to try to get prescriptive about what this question is going to be, or either one of the questions would be specifically. It is sufficient for us to set out in general the description of the matter that we're seeking to get approval on in terms of the resolution to be able to move forward to the next stage, which would be bringing a referendum bill. So, Madam Speaker, with that last clarification, I thank all other members for their contributions. I thank those members who have not spoken, and perhaps it's dangerous to suggest that may reflect tacit support, but I'm assuming if they were intensely troubled by anything, they would have expressed their view. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the following be declared matters of national importance. A, whether a national lottery should be introduced in the Cayman Islands, and B, whether the consumption and possession of small amounts of cannabis should be decriminalized. And be it now therefore further resolved that the said matters be specified in a bill and brought by the government to this Parliament for debate in accordance with the provisions of Section 69 of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 as amended. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Government motion number 3.
Madam Speaker, I call for a division. Madam Speaker, a matter of procedure. Madam Speaker, this matter of procedure matter, I just think it would be important for the record of this House that our Honorable Minister Ebanks had to deal with a family emergency, why he's not here for the record for the vote.
Honorable William Panton.
Aye.
Honorable Christopher Saunders.
Aye.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanny Ebanks. Absent. Honorable Andre Ebanks.
Aye.
Honorable Barney Bush. Aye. Honorable Juliana Connolly. Honorable Dwayne Seymour.
Aye.
Mr. Isaac Rankin.
Aye.
Ms. Heather Barton.
Aye.
Honorable McKeever Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Roy McTaggart.
Aye.
Mr. Joseph Hugh.
Aye.
Honorable Sir Alden McLaughlin.
Madam Speaker, as I indicated, I believe the resolution section of the motion to be fundamentally flawed, and so I will abstain.
Mrs. Moses Kirkconnell.
Aye.
Ms. Barbara Connolly.
Aye.
Mr. David White.
Aye.
have a total of 16 ayes, 1 abstention, and 1 absentee. The ayes have it. Government motion number 3 of 2022-2023 is duly passed. Before we go into the bills, we just take a short suspension for about 30 minutes and resume back at 6 p.m.